the backstop. That means that although we're just talking about how to withdraw, we're talking then again also about what we want in the future, because this is about the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. And that means you can't just talk about how you want to leave, you've got to talk about where you want to end up. What kind of a deal, an agreement do we want with Europe? And you'll hear many terms bandied around about Norway, Canada, there's the Chequers plan, which isn't entirely dead, and a customs union, which is also being discussed. But before we get into any of that, this withdrawal agreement and where we are right now, we have to have a parliamentary vote, because that was put into being by a legal battle last year. So there will be a parliamentary vote on this withdrawal agreement, and that means that of the 650 MPs in Parliament, we have to look at their own personal ideology over Europe, and that is the quantitative approach that BlondeMoney has taken to this. Now, how did we do it? We took 23 criteria, which we used to rank every MP on whether they were a Remainer or a Leaver, and that involved various different things, like were they a member of a particular campaign group, did they support a campaign group or speak at one of their events, did they vote against their own leader in Parliament over an amendment, for example. But beyond that as well, we went back, we looked at all of their speeches in Parliament about Brexit over the last 2.5 years. We looked at what they said about Brexit before the vote, because the point here is that although around 420 constituencies voted to leave, only 120 MPs voted to leave. That is why we are in the pickle that we're in, because it goes against the ideology of so many MPs. And we also looked through, we had a wonderful summer, the analysts and interns here at BlondeMoney, where we went through every single one of these MPs, and we also looked at what they had said in their local media, it's their constituency, and on social media, so we could get a sense of, again, their personal view on Europe. We got this measure of Parliament, -15 the most Remain, +15 the most Leave, which allowed us to have a map, a picture of Parliament, which looks like this. This immediately shows us why it is so difficult for Theresa May to get her party into line. The blue bars are broadly spread from the most Leave. There's even an extreme Remainer in the Conservative Party. So it's also, though, a problem for Labour. They also spread from Remain to Leave, although they're slightly more clustered. But this at least gives us the numbers to start to look at what kind of a deal the MPs would personally be able to vote for. Some of them are just more ideological about Europe than others. And of course, the ones who are at the extremes are the loudest. So Chuka Umunna on the far left there, he is the super Remainer who doesn't want us to leave at all, along with the Tory who sits there, which is Anna Soubry. But then on the other side, we have obviously Jacob Rees-Mogg, Steve Baker, those kinds of names. But as I said, we want to look at what the potential relationship with Europe looks like. And broadly speaking, the ones that are most talked about is Canada Plus, which tends to be the kind of thing that the right-hand side of this chart would like. That is a Canada-style free trade agreement with between the UK and the EU. But then there's Norway, which is kind of a very close relationship, where that would probably more like the middle left section of this chart would be happy with. Of course, the people on the far left don't want to leave at all. But then there's Chequers, which is still being talked about, and that tried to sort of be half in, half out by leaving us in the single market for goods, but with other options for services. So those are the three types of deal that are most often discussed, but there has been a new one in recent weeks, and that has come about because of this backstop issue, and that's this point about a UK-wide customs union. So the reason that started to now come into force is because, as I say, there is a backstop that at the moment, if nothing is agreed, if we cannot come to any kind of deal, that means Northern Ireland would remain in the single market and the customs union. So Northern Ireland would be hived off from the rest of Great Britain and effectively be like the Republic of Ireland. Now, that of course creates great questions about Ireland itself, the island of Ireland, about centuries-long battle between various interests over a unified Ireland versus being part of Great Britain. But it also raises questions for the integrity of the United Kingdom overall, which then flares up questions for Scotland, who voted to remain, and of course, where the Scottish Nationalist Party wants them to become independent. And overall, you know, it raises questions about, you'll hear the Prime Minister say, it's about the constitutional integrity of Great Britain. So they've come up with a solution, they think, which is to say that the default, instead of hiving off Northern Ireland, let's have a UK-wide customs union. So if nothing else happens, all of the UK stays in a customs union. That's supposed to solve the problem of Ireland and the Irish border, although there are question marks over whether it does even, because there would still be some kind of a border. But it's supposed to get the DUP on side. Just a point about the DUP. They are the Democratic Unionist Party. They exist to be in a union with Great Britain. If there is any tiny possibility, and a lot of what is being discussed at the moment is removing possibilities, it's making things less likely, but if there is even a possibility, however small it is, that Northern Ireland may somehow not be part of the United Kingdom, the DUP would not be able to go along with that. Now, because they're propping up the government, that is why it becomes an even bigger issue for the government. And as it stands, this is why the detail of this customs union that appears to be being thrashed out now is so important. So now we're going to look at these different options: Canada, Chequers, UK-wide customs union, and Norway. Before I show you the numbers for each one, and this is the numbers that ideologically could go for each one, it also, we have looked at MPs who have made public announcements. So some MPs have publicly declared, yes, I want Norway. Yes, I want Canada. Yes, I'm okay with Chequers, for example. And before I show you the numbers, I just want to say that some MPs have realised that this is a journey. It is not one point about a deal and it's done. Some of them are saying, let's go to Norway, because that means we can end up as Canada, just to confuse matters. But let me just show you now the numbers that we have come up with for each possibility. So here we are. Norway, UK-wide customs union, Chequers and Canada, the numbers for each. The first thing to spot is that 3 of these options don't have a majority in Parliament, as far as we believe anyway. I would point out here that even the Chequers deal, which has been much derided and a lot of Conservative MPs are very unhappy about, there are still 208 of 315 MPs who would go for it. So 2/3 of Conservatives are actually all right with Chequers. However, still doesn't have a majority. We've put the DUP there as agreeing to a UK-wide customs union because we said they want to remain within the UK. But if that customs union still has a backstop that could somehow lead to Northern Ireland being part of the single market, they would then be against that. So some of these numbers are obviously dependent on exactly how the end state is presented. But the important one, really, we hear all of this about the Conservative Party and the DUP, but the real party that matter are the Labour Party. And we divided them into pro, not Jesus Christ, but Jeremy Corbyn, and anti-Jeremy Corbyn. Because at the moment, the party line for Labour is that they will vote down any deal, anything that Theresa May comes back with. Now, they'll say that's because it doesn't meet these 6 tests that they've had, which they've had in place for some time now. But of course, politically, they think this is a kind of cunning way to try and get round to a general election or get themselves into power. And, you know, they may not be wrong about that. There is something to be said that in the mayhem that could come from Theresa May coming back with a deal which then gets voted down by Parliament, in that mayhem, there is going to be a call for leadership and for change and for somebody to get a grip on what's going on. And, of course, Labour think they could sort of profit from giving the Tories enough rope to hang themselves with. However, of course, as we said, there's no party discipline. There's no party discipline in any party, quite frankly, at the moment. So we know that actually the key for a deal is looking for Labour MPs who are the least loyal to the party line. To do that, we did another set of analysis on just the Labour Party. We introduced a new axis. So previously we had an axis of -15 Remain, +15 for Leave. We took that and then we added the extra axis of how much do they support Jeremy Corbyn. We took 8 criteria for that, for their view on Corbyn. That ranges from people that Momentum, the Labour Party pro-Corbyn grouping who support him, they themselves have characterised they've grouped Labour MPs into being hostile to their cause and pro their cause. So we already had some ranking numbers there. But equally, things like being, a member of the Labour Friends of Israel or the Labour Friends of Palestine, that obviously has taken on a new dimension following the ongoing anti-Semitism row in the Labour Party. And also voting against their party line, which a number of MPs have done. So we basically had a new set of criteria, pro-Corbyn, anti-Corbyn. And that's what got us to this chart. Trying to identify Labour MPs who will defy the whip. So left to right is still the anti-Brexit, pro-Brexit axis that we had before. But then the y-axis is pro-Corbyn at the top. You'll see Diane Abbott up there. No surprise. Down at the bottom is anti-Corbyn. Each of these bubbles, the larger the size of the bubble, the more Labour MPs that reside there. But what we think is so important about this is, okay, we hear a lot from Chuka Umunna, who's right down the bottom left. We even hear from Kate Hoey, who's the most pro-Brexit Labour MP. She's over there on the right-hand side. We get a lot of noise from those people, but they're not really the people who actually matter in the event of a deal. Because we've sort of identified this red, pinkish group here who are fairly anti-Corbyn, but they're also ideologically quite pragmatic. And we noticed, came out about 3 weeks ago in the FT, there was a talk of this constant question of how many Labour MPs would defy the whip. And they quoted Ruth Smeeth, Kevin Jones, Caroline Flint, amongst others. And we were delighted to find that they sat in exactly the circle we had identified. They said, look, we understand that the party line is to vote down a government deal, but we are in Leave constituencies. We must honour the result. We personally may not particularly be pro-leaving, but our constituency is, and we're going to have to go along with the government. Because if we don't go along with the government, then what kind of a mess are we going to be in? We might not leave at all, and my constituency are not going to go for that. And so therefore, that's why we think that this analysis, this chart, is kind of the key to the Brexit deal. And if you really want to get into the nuts and bolts, as one of our clients did, they asked us, okay, well, in which case I want to know who are the anti-Corbyn pragmatists in the seats that voted to leave, which led us to be able to produce this list of MPs. And you can see there, just taking it right at the top there, John Speller, probably someone you may not have heard too much about. He is slightly pro-Brexit. He's in somewhere called Worley. They were 61.8% voted to leave, and he has a big majority. We put majority in as well because actually that is, that concentrates the mind of any MP. As you can see from the next one on the list, Laura Smith in Crewe and Nantwich, she only has a 0.1% majority, so she's in quite a precarious position. Can she vote against a government deal, knowing her constituency strongly want to leave, and leave us in a position where we don't know what's going on, or maybe we don't even leave at all? So that's the question that these MPs have to think about. And if you were so minded to do this, you could also commission polls in some of these constituencies to check and see whether the vote towards leave that's still the preference of that group. I mean, there was a Monday evening, Channel 4 actually ran a documentary on this. The Survation Group have done a poll of 20,000 people nationally. They've broken it down by constituency, and they have actually shown that there has been a slight swing towards Remain and it's come about in Leave seats. Although it should be noted, it came about because a lot of people who didn't vote in 2016 are now saying, I would vote and I'd vote to remain. But there we go. You know, these MPs have to pay attention to what their electorate thinks. There's going to be a general election in 2022, or of course, much sooner than that. So, you know, that dynamic is significant. Now, so we've talked about the shape of Parliament. We've talked about the type of deal and what might get through. We've talked about who should listen to, who matters for actually getting a deal agreed and passed through Parliament. But in terms of where do we go from here, let's just check the timeline, because it's very, very tight, as we keep hearing. So wonderfully for Parliament, today's the 7th of November, they're off on their holidays again. They don't come back until the 13th. There is the talk of there was a cabinet meeting yesterday. There's been some discussion that there may be an emergency cabinet meeting on Friday. This is to get the legal advice on the backstop and the UK-wide customs union, etc., to try and come up with something that could be a deal, which could then go to a possible EU summit on my birthday, November the 29th. Remember that, the key date. But that might be when it could get agreed by the EU, and then, of course, in the 2 weeks after that, we could have the parliamentary vote. However, we've heard before about this possible November date. So if it doesn't get, if the cabinet cannot agree on a watertight deal with a good backstop and something that they think they could sell more broadly, then we flip to the regular EU summit. It's already been confirmed, December 13th to 14th. It should be pointed out that just like the last EU summit, for this one, December 13-14, Brexit is merely an agenda item. You know, the EU have got an awful lot of other things that they're trying to deal with at the moment, not least a change of power potentially in Germany, obviously the problems in Italy with their budget. But yes, December 13th, 14th could be when this all does get ratified. However, Parliament are then on recess again from the 21st of December. So there's a very tight, squeezy deadline there that they may be able to have a parliamentary vote. There has been some talk about recalling Parliament over Christmas. As you might imagine, that has not gone down very well with MPs. So even if something is done in December, it may flip on into January. Then you'll see we only have between January 8th and February 8th to get anything sorted in Parliament, and then Brexit is upon us. So this is why we keep saying that the next 6 weeks are absolutely crucial for Brexit and for the risks. And if we were to, we are not entirely sure why people would be wanting to own volatility over next March. That's not really the interesting date. The interesting date is the next 6 weeks, because that is when we're going to actually see what is the bones of this deal and who in Parliament can support it. So I'm going to get to our conclusions now, and then I'll open it up for questions. So the Irish border is the whole Brexit debate in microcosm. That's why it's important. It might sound really annoying and frustrating and boring, and you can't understand why the Irish can't agree to certain things. But it's all about what kind of relationship we're going to have with the EU by the end of the process. How close are we going to be? Are we going to have frictionless trade? Is there going to be a hard border? And this is where the DUP are very important. They would be important even if they were not part of government, which they are. They exist only to defend the union. That's their name, you know, Democratic Unionist Party. But the Conservative Party is also the Conservative and Unionist Party. That is why, you know, Theresa May said 6 months ago, no Prime Minister could accept this backstop. That's why it's going to keep rumbling on. It also means that in the end, the DUP may accept a hard border and a Canada-type deal, because at least that keeps them as part of the United Kingdom, and we don't have to worry about anything else. But that debate is not going away. Number two, though, Labour MPs are the key for any Brexit deal. They're the ones we need to keep an eye on. No deal, what does it actually mean? Well, there are various stages to every part of the deal, and as I said, we're only agreeing on a withdrawal agreement and a future framework. But no deal could mean crashing out and leaving and just walking away, but it could mean no Brexit. It could mean that it just can't be done, public opinion changes, it just ends up going in that direction instead. And this is where the fear of no deal affects that original chart about the MP's ideology. Because are they prepared to go down fighting for their ideology, like let's say Jacob Rees-Mogg, but it leads to no deal, which leads to no Brexit? That's not going to work for him. This is not about a destination. It is a multi-stage process as well. There will be various stages of deals as we proceed. And, you know, ignore the noises from Rees-Mogg and Munna, David Davis. We know what they think. We know what they're trying to say. The swing vote is actually public opinion. You know, we touched on before MPs looking at what their constituencies voted and how big their majorities were. And this is absolutely crucial to the whole thing. Who is going to sell the deal? Who is going to be good at selling the deal to Britain? Now, we know Theresa May struggles because she couldn't even get a majority in that election last year. And their line of attack from the government currently seems to be, well, we don't much like it. We had to negotiate. We've had to compromise. This is what we've come up with. If we don't do this, we might not leave at all, or we might leave very badly, so you'll just have to swallow it. That is one way to sell something. It's not the most promising way to sell something. And then you look at people like Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson, and whatever you might think about them personally, they have always been very good communicators and very good salespeople. So if they stand up, as they are doing, and say, this deal is a shambles, it sells us out, it's not Brexit, we're staying in, and we're staying in on worse terms, and it's not what you wanted, we don't have control of our borders, we'll still have immigration, we'll, you know, still can't do trade deals. Is that message going to get across? Now, I would argue that Farage and Boris are more discredited than they were 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, when they were standing in front of buses. But there is no denying their ability to communicate, and no denying that Farage has now got Steve Bannon over in Europe trying to do more of what he did with Trump in terms of the messaging. So the final conclusion then we would leave you with is the numbers are difficult for a deal at this stage. In 6 weeks, we think that will become apparent. Even then, it would struggle to be sold to the British public, and that means that at the margin, leaving with no deal is more likely to appeal to the British public than remaining. And therefore, we just see it being pretty likely there's going to be a significant crisis and mayhem just around the corner.